You're watching a production of South Dakota Public Broadcasting.
State House program funding provided by the South Dakota Bar Foundation, the educational and charitable arm of South Dakota lawyers and judges.
Well, good morning and welcome to the Democratic Press Conference. It's been another interesting week. After this week, we'll only have 3 weeks left. I'm Billy Sutton, District 21 Senator, Senate Minority Leader from Burke, and I'll turn it over to Julie to make some comments, and then we'll dive into the conversation.
Okay. Well, good morning. Representative Julie Bartling. I'm from District 21 as well. I'm in the Gregory area. And as Senator Sutton said, we're well over the halfway mark, and now we are hitting into a lot of bills that are coming forward that we've been waiting to hear about. And at least on the House side, we've taken up a lot of bills in regards to initiated measures and the constitutional ballot questions, things of that, as far as the public's right to circulate petitions, things of that nature. So we've continued to work on those, and with this, the biggest things for us, I think, coming now are with the revenue estimates in. We can really start flowing with some of the high priorities that we as Democrats have for workforce development, education funding, things of that nature. So with that, I'll let Senator Sutton, who's on appropriations, talk about some of those priorities as well.
Yeah, so as everyone is aware, the Appropriations Committee adopted revenue estimates, essentially gave us a little over $16 million more for FY18, and for FY19, a little over $18 million, almost $19 million more than what the governor had proposed in his budget address. So that certainly gives us a little bit of breathing room. I think there will be hopefully some increases. It's yet to be seen what those will look like, but we will certainly prioritize education providers, especially our high need providers and state employees, with the dollars that we have available. We've had several proposals to use other dollars, including the Future Fund, to fund some of our priorities. It's disappointing that most of those measures were defeated, and you know, we need to continue having that conversation about things like the needs-based scholarship and building South Dakota. You know, we do appreciate that the governor is proposing $4.9 million for building South Dakota, but it needs at least double that to be as effective as we need it to be. And so we really have to dig deep to prioritize the dollars that we have and get creative with how we fund those priorities. But it is good news that our revenue projections are up from what they were, and so we're happy about that. The other thing that you know, I think has been a general theme for this session is openness and transparency in government, and there still is one of our bills alive dealing with that. It's the Records Retention Bill, Senate Bill 133. And so we're hopeful that that's going to keep moving forward through the process as well. So with that, we will turn it over to questions, and we'll see here. We have a bill up in appropriations right now, actually, that we're hearing testimony on, which is to build the State Veterans Cemetery in Sioux Falls. Very important topic, a lot of great testimony going on. So if I have to leave early, that means that it's time to vote. So.
Good morning. Thank you for being here this morning. I was curious to hear from both of you your thoughts about where that roughly $19 million in extra revenue for FY19 should go, what should be prioritized in your opinion, and how much you can really give to each of those three potential affected groups.
Yeah, I think number one, if I might start, is statutorily we're required to give K-12 education 3% or CPI, whichever is less. And so this would create an opportunity to fulfill our obligation to K-12 in that vein, and hopefully that will fulfill our obligation to try to continue raising teacher pay. One of the conversations we've been having is that if we can't give increases to K-12 education, it's very difficult to hold those schools to the standard we set as far as accountabilities to raise teacher pay. If we don't give them the money, it's pretty dang hard to raise that pay. And so I think that's probably one of our first priorities.
Yeah, and then, then we can also look at the state employees. They haven't had a pay increase this would be 2 years now. And actually, it's probably going to hit them a little harder with the increase in the governor's proposal on health insurance, where they will actually be picking up more of the cost of health insurance. So we'd like to see if there's some priority to help them out as well. And then we always, the Building South Dakota, the housing opportunity portion of that is in desperate need of some funds. You're not going to be able to continue to create workforce if you don't have housing. And so we need to, as the legislature, that was a project or a program that we designed, and I think we need to be very assertive in finding the funds to help continue with Building South Dakota and make it a very strong program and one that will actually see the benefits over time. I'm sorry.
Does 19 million give you enough room to fund well those priorities, education, community support providers, and anybody else that is coming to you for some money right now?
Probably not as much as you would actually need to have a huge impact, but we're going to have that discussion with our friends across the aisle as to what that looks like, and break these dollars out as fairly as we can and try to reach all our priorities. It's going to be a challenge, but we're up to that challenge, and we're ready to work across the aisle to get that done.
Yes, and I agree with that as well. We do have that statutory obligation to K-12 education, and hopefully we can at least fulfill that obligation. I know with the teachers' salaries, they are required to meet the minimum salary, if I can call it that, the base salary. And some of the schools will have difficulty doing that if we can't continue to see that those education funds head their ways. So, excuse me, it's certainly not enough, but hopefully, as Senator Sutton says, our colleagues will work with us to see what more we can do.
You also spoke about some of the bills aimed at affecting the initiated measure process. Can you speak about the bills that have come through the House and the Senate, and what message they send to voters at this point?
Well, I think we've seen probably the bigger lion's share of them on the House side in House State Affairs right now. The ones that are coming over are putting quite a stiff requirement on petition circulators and petition sponsors, and that's such a key part of that initiated measure and constitutional amendment process, is to gather those signatures. And I think we've really I guess we've gone overboard. We're ratcheting it down pretty tight as to who can circulate and how can they, what the parameters are that they must meet in order to be a circulator, and I think it's just going to make it very restrictive. We did pass a bill off the floor just yesterday, and it's just by a couple votes, and it's headed over, but it limits the contributions that can come from out-of-state individuals or entities to support or work against a ballot measure. It's one that I think is, as the opponents of the bill, which were like the retailers and chambers of commerce and things of that nature, they actually, opposed it, citing that South Dakota just doesn't have the dollars within its own means from people or entities to support or oppose a ballot. So oftentimes out-of-state money is definitely needed if it's a measure that we want to really fight or really push. I think we have to be very careful that when we start restricting that it's going to be harmful. Plus, I don't know that it's even constitutional to do that.
Yeah, and from our, my perspective, all these bills are kind of a departure from how these types of things have been handled in the past. And what I mean by that is that we had a summer study dealing with initiated measures, and there were a lot of ideas vetted through that process, and there were a lot of reasonable pieces of legislation that came out of that summer study. And so typically how it's been handled in the past with this body is that if there are a bunch of other excess bills that were already vetted or that weren't vetted through that summer study, that people would just decide not to bring them, or they would be defeated because they didn't have the time that those other measures had during the summer study. But that has not been the case this session. It seems like besides the bills that came out of the summer study, there are a whole host of other bills that are actually seem to be moving through the process. And I think that's problematic. I think it's problematic when you seek to tamp down the voice of the people. I've said it before and I'll say it again. We trust voters to send us to peer, but it seems like they aren't trusted at the ballot. And as it relates to initiated measures and constitutional amendments, and I just fundamentally disagree with that premise.
As I mentioned before, there was a bill that was hog-housed this morning in committee. It dealt with barring teaching gender identity in schools. That's the third bill this week to be either gutted or tabled, dealing with transgender bathroom access or gender identity. It seems to mark the end of that set of debates in peer. Any thoughts about that topic coming up again and now ending potentially?
Yeah, I would just say that I think this conversation is a solution in search of a problem on a number of different bills that have come forward. This has not been a big issue in South Dakota, and we need to be focusing on what our priorities should be, and that's making sure that we have a transparent and accountable government, that we make sure we're developing our workforce, that we're putting ourselves in a position to have a flourishing economy. And these types of conversations are taking away from that and taking the precious time that we have to get our work done. And we have over 533 bills this session, the most since 2001. And we have so many big things that we need to be focusing on. And too often we get sidetracked on these kind of issues that take up way more time, that we're not really even actually solving a problem.
I agree with Senator Sutton, and we've had these conversations for the past few years in a variety of bills, and the administration, has been very firm in their opposition to those bills as well. And it's about local control, and I think we need to trust our school districts that on the societal issues that are out there regarding youth and whatnot, that's being handled. They're very aware of the issues, and they work towards what's best for the students and all. And I hope that after the measure was hog-housed today, that it would be one of the last that we'll see this session. And Senator Sutton says we can fixate on doing the things that are great for South Dakota's economy, workforce development, all those big issues, including the issues of meth and opioids and things of that nature. Those are some very critical needs in South Dakota that we really need to pay attention to and get working on. Otherwise, it's just going to continue to escalate out of control.
What are some of your takeaways from this legislative week, and what are you looking forward to next week, if anything?
Yeah, I think I'm looking forward to a conversation about allocating the dollars that we have from an appropriations committee standpoint. We have a much different process now than we used to have as it relates to appropriating dollars. We'll have subcommittees that are working through different budget units and then proposing those increases or changes to the full committee. And so I'm looking forward to those conversations now that we have a better feel for what our revenues look like and how we can prioritize those dollars. And so we do have a much better process, I think, than we used to have. You know, I've served on appropriations now for 6 of my 8 years here. And I remember the first few years, it was a train wreck. I mean, we would go till the last day, and there would be, maybe 100 or more amendments to the general bill, and it really wasn't a very good process. And so, I think we've made some good changes, and so I'm looking forward to that conversation as to working with our subcommittee members and finding some common ground on how we want to prioritize these dollars. As far as a takeaway from this week, I don't know if I have a good answer for that. We've dealt with a number of bills on the floor. It's been kind of a typical week for this legislative session. This legislative session has been different than some of my other sessions, to the degree that the governor didn't propose a big initiative, and it seems like it's just been kind of a different session than what I'm used to up here, because there hasn't been that one big issue that you can really throw yourself into. There's a bunch of side issues, whether it's the discussion about alcohol or non-meandered water, and there just really hasn't been a tone set for what this session was hoping to accomplish.
And on the House side, we've had, this past week we were inundated with emails in regards to the collective bargaining for higher education. That bill did pass, and it's headed over to the Senate. There was a lot of debate on that one as to whether, collective bargaining should end in South Dakota for higher education. And of course, we heard from a number of the individuals in higher education as to the importance of it in regards to attracting and recruiting and retaining professors in the university system, and for the work that they do. And I think it's very important in our perspective anyway, my perspective, that it be retained. However, as I said, it did pass. That bill did pass off the floor and is headed to the Senate. And then we also received a number of emails on the governor's licensure compact bill, and it's coming to the full floor. We just passed it out of House State Affairs. A lot of the professions are not comfortable with it. It's put together in a fashion that they aren't certain as to the parameters within their own professions. They all try to work to encourage other individuals to come to the state to practice in their field of expertise, and to try and make that process as easy and as simple as possible, but yet to maintain the parameters and the respect of what that profession is. There are other states that are looking at it. We haven't heard if any of them have adopted a similar compact language that has been proposed, but we've just I don't know. I think as far as being put together, I don't know that if I could say that it might have been put together quite hastily without really looking at the full issues out there and how it might affect all those various professions. On the Senate side, they have a bill that would allow for opt-outs, and my understanding is the administration is not in support of that, because it literally will take out all of the professions that I believe the governor has proposed to try to have that pathway to temporary licensure. So I believe that one will have some debate on the floor, but I know many of the professions are just not happy with it, and there is a concern that it could work the opposite for South Dakota. If surrounding states, neighboring states, whomever might enter into a similar compact, will we lose professionals that will head to another state because they have another path to get a temporary licensure in another state? So it could work adversely for us as well. So. And as far as perspective, I agree with Senator Sutton. I think now that the revenue's in, a great deal of the focus will be on what can we do with those funds? How will we meet the budgetary needs of South Dakota?
How would you categorize you mentioned talking and working with the other side of the aisle. How has that relationship been overall this session? It seems like it's maybe a little more cordial than in past sessions. Am I not reading that right?
I think that's, I suppose it depends on the individuals that you work with, you know, but overall, I think I've found in sessions where there isn't a lot of money to be had, it's a lot less contentious. There seems to be less fighting because you don't have any money to fight over. And so I think for the most part, it's been pretty cordial. I mean, what I can tell you for the last several years is that there's really three parties here in the state capitol. Oftentimes the fight is actually between members of their own caucus.